History is filled with stories that blur the line between fact and fiction, events so strange they feel like they belong in a horror movie. But what if I told you about a time when an entire city was gripped by a plague that made them dance? Literally to death? This isn't a fairy tale. This is the true, terrifying, and utterly bizarre story of the dancing plague of 1518. Picture this. It's a hot July day in the city of Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire. The streets are bustling with merchants, craftsmen, and townspeople going about their daily lives. Suddenly, a woman, known to history as Frau Trophia, steps out of her home and into the street. She begins to dance. There's no music, no celebration, just a silent, frantic dance. Her movements are jerky, desperate, and completely involuntary. At first, her neighbors probably thought it was a strange, private moment of joy or perhaps madness. They watched, puzzled, maybe even amused. But Frau Trophia didn't stop. She danced for hours, her body twisting and turning under the summer sun. As day turned into night, and night into the next day, she was still there, trapped in a relentless rhythm. Her feet were swollen and bleeding, her face etched with exhaustion and terror, but she could not stop. She danced for nearly a week straight, a solitary, haunting spectacle in the middle of the city. This is where the story takes an even darker turn. Instead of helping her, or her ordeal simply ending, something truly unbelievable happened. One by one, others began to join her. First a few, then a dozen. Within a week, the strange compulsion had seized over 30 people. They weren't dancing together in a coordinated way. Each person was lost in their own frantic, uncontrolled movements. The streets of Strasbourg transformed from a place of commerce to a scene of mass hysteria, a sprawling, chaotic dance floor of suffering. The city authorities were completely bewildered. They had never seen anything like it. Doctors and clergymen were consulted, but they had no answers. Was it a curse? A divine punishment? The physicians of the time, relying on ancient Greek medical theories, concluded that the dancers were suffering from hot blood. Their diagnosis was that the only cure was to let the fever burn itself out. And how would they do that? By encouraging more dancing. In one of the most misguided public health responses in history, the city officials decided to facilitate the plague. They cleared out public spaces, like the guild halls and the grain market, to give the dancers more room. They even constructed a large wooden stage in the middle of the city. To keep the rhythm going, they hired professional musicians, pipers, drummers, and fiddlers to play day and night. Their thinking was that if the afflicted danced continuously, they would eventually sweat out the disease and recover. But their plan backfired spectacularly. The constant music and the official endorsement of the dancing only seemed to fuel the frenzy. More and more people were drawn into the macabre carnival. The sight of hundreds of people dancing uncontrollably, combined with the non-stop music, created an atmosphere of pure mania. It was a feedback loop of chaos. The number of dancers swelled, and by August, historical accounts suggest that around 400 people were caught in the grip of this dancing mania. The scene must have been horrific. Men, women, and even children dancing wildly in the streets for weeks on end. They danced until their bodies gave out. They suffered from dehydration, starvation, and complete physical exhaustion. Their feet were torn and bloody, their bones were fracturing, but the compulsion was too strong to overcome. Eyewitness accounts describe people pleading for help, crying out in pain, even as their limbs continued to move against their will. The death toll began to rise. People collapsed and died from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer exhaustion. Some reports claim that at the plague's peak, as many as 15 people were dying each day. Strasbourg had become a city of death, all set to the beat of a relentless drum. Desperate and realizing their initial plan had been a catastrophic failure, the authorities changed their strategy. They banned all public music and dancing. They rounded up the remaining dancers and took them to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, a saint who was believed to have the power to cure nervous disorders, including what they called Saint Vitus dance. The dancers were made to pray for forgiveness and salvation. Gradually, over the next few weeks, the epidemic began to subside. The dancers, one by one, finally stopped moving, and the city slowly returned to a traumatized version of normal. So, what on earth caused this? For centuries, the dancing plague of 1518 has been one of history's most baffling medical mysteries. And even today, scientists and historians don't have a definitive answer, but there are two leading theories. The first and perhaps most plausible is mass psychogenic illness, more commonly known as mass hysteria. Life in 16th century Strasbourg was incredibly difficult. The region had been ravaged by famine, poverty, and disease. People were living under immense psychological stress. It is possible that this collective trauma manifested physically in a small group and then spread through social contagion. Seeing others in a state of distress can trigger a similar response in onlookers, especially in a highly superstitious and anxious population. The initial actions of the authorities, building a stage and hiring musicians, would have only validated and amplified the hysteria. The second major theory points to a physical cause: ergotism. Ergot is a type of mold that grows on damp rye, a staple grain at the time. This mold contains chemicals that are structurally similar to LSD. Consuming ergot-contaminated bread can cause a condition called ergotism, which has two forms. One causes gangrene, but the other, convulsive ergotism, causes violent muscle spasms, tremors, and hallucinations. This perfectly aligns with the descriptions of the dancers' uncontrolled movements and terrified expressions. It's possible that the entire community had been poisoned by a bad batch of rye flour. However, the one problem with this theory is that ergot poisoning typically makes people very ill and unable to perform coordinated, sustained activity like dancing for days. It doesn't quite explain the sheer endurance of the dancers. It's also possible that the truth is a combination of both. Perhaps an initial outbreak of ergot poisoning triggered a few cases, and then mass hysteria took over, spreading the bizarre behavior throughout the stressed and terrified population. Regardless of the exact cause, the dancing plague stands as a chilling testament to the power of the human mind and the strange ways that society can break under pressure. It wasn't the only dancing mania in history. There were several other smaller outbreaks in Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, but the Strasbourg event was by far the largest and the deadliest. Today, the streets of Strasbourg are calm and picturesque. It's hard to imagine them as the backdrop for such a terrifying and surreal event. But it happened. It's a stark reminder that history is not just a collection of dates and battles. It's filled with deeply human stories that are often far stranger, more complex, and more mysterious than any work of fiction. What do you think caused hundreds of people to dance themselves to death? Was it a psychological breakdown, a biological poison, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for joining me on this journey into one of history's weirdest chapters. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the unexplained corners of our past. See you next time.